What is up, vinyl community? Today we have a very special guest. We're welcoming Van, legendary VC member, Secretary of Funk. Welcome, Van.
Peace, peace.
For those of you that have been following my channel for a long time, you know that Van has, shared a lot of knowledge. Kind of how I discovered a lot of this music behind me was through digging into his channel. And so I'm really happy to have him on here and get to find out a little bit more about his journey through music. If you don't follow Van, it's SecOfunk on Instagram and on YouTube, and he's back in the game. Welcome back. Your reintroduction into the vinyl community. There's a lot of new members that probably don't know you because it's continued to grow over the years.
Yeah, I'm back on deck, man.
Yeah. The most charismatic member of the VC. Your videos are always entertaining.
Oh, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I get carried away sometimes.
You just go with the flow, natural.
Yeah, I do, man. I try to get it all in one shot. It really frustrates me, like when I have camera issues and it goes down, then I have to like try to recreate that energy again. So then normally I just walk away. When
you record like a 20-minute video and you realize it didn't work, you're like, oh, so discouraged to do it again. You're like,
man, I'm trying to tell you, that's like it just takes all the wind out of your sails,
So the first question that I've kind of been asking people is, it could be the first or some first early memories of music bringing you joy in your life as a kid.
Yeah, man. Music has always been around. I mean, since I can remember. I mean, my father, he wasn't an audiophile, but he was, I guess, like a lot of guys back in the 70s, like one of those kind of like stereo hobbyists. The old Pioneer stereo where they have all of these different units on like, something that I guess could resemble an IKEA shelf, but, that could fit all the different Pioneer units, the AM FM receiver, the stereo receiver. And I just remember him having this wall of stereo equipment with the big box speakers.
Did he have more than one was he changing and he had more, or it was like, no, he had his amp, his radio, he had all that, and that was the same for your childhood, or did he kind of have?
I really don't remember if he was changing them in and out. I just remember always him having the same one. And I also remember, as I got older, went off to college and everything, I remember he got rid of like the old silver Pioneer things and he traded in for like these black Sony ones. And I was just like, man, that is just not as cool as what you used to have. I remember telling him that, and he kind of acknowledged that. But back in the day, it was him and my uncle. They were building these stereo, I guess collections or stereo setups. And man, I grew up on a beach here in Maryland, just outside of DC. So every 4th of July, my father would have a huge picnic. So all of the friends of the family and everybody would come down. And that stereo was the centerpiece of that get together because, it was loud. I remember him opening up windows and setting speakers out back and just running this cable. I remember him running around before everybody got down there on the 4th of July, setting up his stuff, taking out the extra long speaker wire and everything like that. So, those were my early memories of music. And then, just watching my family dancing. And then, of course, you can't forget the songs, the staples that are like, the Motown. And then, I guess the grown up music at the time was like, the Frankie Beverly and Maze and the Earth, Wind and Fire, stuff like that. So,
and what,
and he had,
what do you do? Did he let you touch it? Or were you like, knowing that you have daughters now and a bunch of stereo stuff, like at what age was you kind of?
Yeah, man, no, it was always frustrating for him because, the EQ component of that stereo system was just always fascinating me. Those rows of those toggle switches, and I just used to make designs out of them. So, I don't know how frustrated he used to get, but I don't remember. But I can imagine today if I had that component in my stereo, my daughter just messing with my EQ sounds. You trying to dial in that perfect sound, and here comes your young child, trying to make a roller coaster out of the knobs, or So I mean, I don't remember getting into trouble though.
No, but from an early age, you were interacting with stereo equipment, records, like it was around. It was an important part of the family atmosphere, is what it sounds like, which makes sense.
Yeah,
Seeing the
yeah, no doubt. Yeah,
passion.
absolutely. I mean, and that was like most of my family and friends of the family too. I mean, like everybody seems like they were doing that back then. They're building these component systems, you know, and so it's, no matter where I went, you know, family picnics that were at people's houses, they all had something similar, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when was the first, like, what was is there some songs you remember or moments you can like visualize in your head of like, is it those picnics of like hearing songs and being like, wow, I really enjoy hearing music. Like this gives me joy.
Man, Frankie Beverly and Maze. I just remember those. I remember those albums. I don't know if you're familiar with the album covers from Frankie Beverly and Maze.
No, I know the
Some
name.
of them are like
Music.
pictures of hands.
Okay.
And there's like mazes going all through the fingers. Like these were the album covers that I remember distinctly. And then of course the Earth, Wind and Fire albums. You know, those murals, so to speak, that kind of give a nod to like Egyptian images and stuff like that. So, you know, those were just like anthems, you know, especially to, you know, Black Americans, African Americans, you know, Frankie Beverly, Before I Let Go, staple. Earth, Wind and Fire, all of their songs pretty much, but you know, those are the songs that really stick out of my childhood. You would think it would be more Motown, and but for, you know, now that I think about it, my dad was more so the kind of like Frankie Beverly and Maze, Gap Band kind of guy. My mom was the Motown, you know, she was the Motown James Brown type one. So, you know, of course, you know, and then the James Brown songs, I mean, that guy, all the way up to his death, was making just music that just kind of, you know, resonated in your soul, and kind of like, you know, whenever he dropped something, you paid attention. So, you know, James Brown, Frankie Beverly Maze, Gap Band, just Cameo, those are the songs that stick in my head. Yeah.
It's funny you say about Motown, because like I grew up with, you know, my parents loving music as well, and my mom loved Motown. Like I would always hear talking about Motown when I was a kid. She loved to dance, so she would put that on and dance and stuff like that. But my dad, he never liked soul music. He's like, it's too soft. Like he was a jazz or blues, like folk, anything but soul. But he was like just not into the soul. But I did have it all around me, because between both of them, it was a good kind of mix with their differences.
Right. Yeah. They both bringing something to the table, and creating your musical palette, so to speak. Right.
Exactly. What? So when do you like branching off? Like you're growing up. When do you remember like seeking out your own music? Like, kind of branching out from just listening to what your parents were. When did you start, and what did you start with?
Well, I mean, of course, you know, the music of my generation. I'm an '80s baby. Well, born in '79 with 2 weeks left to the '80s, but you know, so naturally, hip hop ushered me in. Hip hop, R&B, neo soul. I mean, like the first piece of music that I bought with my own money was the Roots album, "Do You Want More?" Like that was the first. Like I remember leaving school and getting that album, like with my own money. And then, you know, everything else was kind of like, you know, the era of the cassette tape. Everybody's making a tape, borrowing music from people in middle school, high school, getting their tapes, taking it home, dubbing it, and making my own mixtapes. So, you know, it was pretty much hip hop was the music that I sought out by myself. I didn't start getting into jazz, and I didn't start reaching back and familiarizing myself with the songs of my childhood until I got to college. You know, when I got to college, it was on and popping. That was when Napster at first dropped.
Yeah.
And, you know, to have a huge collection of MP3s was the thing back then, you know, especially because everybody really wasn't even sure. Even when I was in college, I would say probably like 1 out of 10 people really knew what an MP3 was and where to get it. But, you know, my friends, my close friends and my roommates in college, we were on it. I'm talking like 90, 98, 99. So we would go to the computer labs. Like, you know, we used to have the zip drives. Do you remember the zip drives? They were kind of like the extra thick floppy drive, but they had a higher capacity of memory or storage. So we used to actually, we had zip drives. I used to work at Best Buy, and so I would get like zip drives in the actual disc at a discount. And so we used to go to the library and hook up the zip drive to the computer. This is back in the day. You can do this now. You know, of course, like you plug in something into a public computer room or whatever you want, a computer lab, bells and whistles go off. You'll get kicked out. But you could hook it up back in '99, and I just remember us discovering that the computer science majors, their building, they had their own lab, and it was way faster than the one in the library. So once we discovered that, it was on. It was over. We went in there, we installed Napster on their computers, right? And we would just sit there literally all day on a weekend, or as long as they were open, and we would just download songs after songs. And of course, it started with, with hip hop and everything. But I had this one friend that was just as into music as I was, or at least he was kind of like getting nostalgic about the music of his childhood like I was. And we started battling each other. So we would go off, we'll be in the lab, not saying anything to each other, 8 hours at a time, like on a Saturday. And we're just downloading music, downloading songs. And we would go back, and I would drag my computer into his room or vice versa. And we would sit at it like we're dueling DJs. And like, remember this? And that's really how it started.
Was that, I guess at that point, it was just individual songs, not whole albums, when you were doing it through Napster?
No, it was just individual songs. Yeah, it was just individual songs. And the fact that I wanted to start getting the whole albums is what led me into actually collecting vinyl. Because, so, if I could back up, way before I went off to college, I would say right before middle school, my parents got a divorce. And they split the albums right down the center, like really. I mean, and so my mom took hers, and I always fool myself. I swear I remember my mom going through the albums and saying, like, oh, I remember, this is mine. I'm taking this one. I'm taking this one. I remember he can have his, but these are mine. So I remember that. And then, so when I went off to college, and we were gathering all this stuff, my refrigerator for my dorm room and all of that. I remember her saying, naturally we're going through stuff in the house, and she's purging things. And we came to it was like 3 crates of records that she got that she took a decade earlier before during the divorce. And she was like, I don't want these. You want these? And at the time, I'm not really interested in old music, but I did say yes. And those went all the way down to Tallahassee, Florida with me from DC. And they sat while I was doing this whole MP3 battles with my friend. They did
some of the music.
Say that again?
You had some of the music already sitting there in the crib.
I had some of the music, but it never clicked. It never clicked. Like, these records were just sitting there. And so I remember it was Cameo's song. I was battling my friend. It was Cameo's song called Rigor Mortis. It's funky as hell. Like, I did. If you're not familiar with it, definitely go and look that song up. It's called Rigor Mortis. And when I played it, my friend and I, we were just kind of like on cloud 9. We were like, what the hell is this? Because when I downloaded, I didn't know what it was. I just clicked it, downloaded, played it, and I was like, oh man, I remember this. Matter of fact, it's playing in the background of I think the Friday After Next, the Ice Cube movie. Somewhere in that movie, they are playing Rigor Mortis. But I mean, the lyrics, the way the song breaks down, the way the song progresses, everything like that, it just kind of grabbed me, and it made me want to look for the rest of the album. And I was like, man, you know what? Yeah, I think I have Cameo's album. I wonder if it's on that one. And it wasn't, but I did have Cameo's album, but I didn't have a record player. And just to give you an idea, that moment that I'm talking about is still 2.5 years before I even got a record player. So these records in my crate were just sitting there. And it was just kind of crazy to think about it, because, they're just kind of sitting there marinating, and who knew what it was gonna evolve into. You know what I mean?
So that was what, late 90s, I guess.
Late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, and I didn't start spinning records while I was in college until like 2002, where I had a girlfriend that I don't even know why, but she knew I was into music. She knew I was at that time. I was in the old music, the music of our childhood and generations before us. And she just got me like, she was like, "Oh, you're gonna love your birthday present." I'm like, okay, what is it? You know, and she got me this record player. It was a record player that looked old school on purpose, but it was new. It was just manufactured at the time, and it had a speaker already on it. It was, just one of those like box record players, all in one. I think you could find them probably in like, it would be like a record player that like Best Buy would sell now, if you know what I mean. No shade on Best Buy.
Does she know the beast that she created?
I'm sure she sees the pictures. I'm sure she sees the pictures. I don't know if she could draw, if she like, I gave him a record player, but if she sees this, then yeah, she's the one who really started it. So this is like 2002, and now I started playing records, and I was playing my mom's records. So these were the James Browns, stuff like that. I mean, and I just remember like on that crappy speaker that was integrated in on that record player, it still sounded good to me. But it wasn't. I don't even remember when I actually started yearning for a actual setup to where I could actually appreciate or draw more out of the music. But yeah, while I was thinking about this interview last night, it dawned on me from like 99 to 2006, I was collecting records, but from 99 to 2006, I had never visited a record store.
So when was the first time you went out and bought a record that wasn't like from your mom's collections, where you were like, okay, I'm going to go get more records. I have these records. I've never played them. When did it start where you went and, dipped?
It was weird, man, because I started collecting records shortly after, that whole kind of like rigor mortis cameo thing. And I started digging through the records.
Without a record player? Without a record player, you were buying?
Without a record player, yes. Without a record player. That's what I'm saying. It's crazy. Without a record player, never even dawned on me to go to a record store. I was in Tallahassee for 5 years. I went to the swap meets into the flea market, the Tallahassee flea market. That's where you hear me saying like, oh, this is one of my original ones that I got while I was in Florida. I didn't know what I was getting. I was pretty much digging through records, looking for name recognition. And if I knew I had the MP3, I was like, okay, I have an MP3 from this. Let me get that album. And yeah, without a record player.
People records are normal to us, but for a lot of people, they're foreign now. But people are like, oh, you have so many records. Do you listen to them? I'm like, what do you mean, do I listen to them? You think I'm just buying records to have them as decoration? But it's funny to hear you say like you were buying records without even a way to listen to them.
Yeah, man, it was just, I've always been a collector of things, though. I think that's where it comes from. I've always been a collector of things, and always at like a high level. Baseball cards, naturally. Like I'm not the kid with a couple of shoe boxes full of baseball cards. I literally had hundreds of thousands of baseball cards. I used to buy them by the box, and I still have them. Coincidentally, they're sitting down in my basement with the rest of my collection. You remember, I used to have like 2 walls of vinyl.
Oh, you just have one?
Say that again?
You just have that one wall now?
I just have this one wall in a 4x4 shelf right here that my record player and everything sits on. I can't. The old wall, the one that went from floor to ceiling, I used to sit like where I'm sitting now, but further up by a window. So you would get this back wall, and you would get this whole wall right here. All of those are in my basement.
I feel like
they're packed up.
You had like when you did have your full room, I remember you doing a video in a basement saying like all my Motown stuff, and you already had stuff in the basement, if I recall.
Yeah, I purged that.
Okay.
Yeah, I purged that. It took me like 6 months to go through it all. I purged all of that because you know, the Motown and everything, it was doubles and triples. It was quadruples sometimes. Some of them, I always used to say, some of them looked like a cat owned it and a chicken borrowed it from them, you know, scratched up. But now, like, my Motown is just like, it's pretty long. I think I hit my thing. But my Motown is this whole bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, just these 4. All of that is Motown, Tamla, Gordy, Motown subsidiaries. So that's what I've kind of shrunk it down to. But yeah, when I did that video, like, all my other stuff is down here, and I was kind of going through boxes, I think, and pulling out random stuff. Yeah, all of that has been sorted through. I actually let a local record store owner here come through, and I let him take whatever he wanted in exchange for store credit. So it kind of worked out.
So backtracking, so you're starting to buy records, and you don't have a record player, then you get your record player at this point, and then you start going to record stores shortly thereafter. Where does it kind of?
Oh no, I get my record player, and I'm playing those same 3 crates of records for years, with the exception of, if I was to guess how many records I obtained by myself outside of those crates of records while I was away at school, I would say maybe 120. So what's that, like a crate and a half?
Yeah.
And so
no jazz yet, really? Mostly just kind of?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
You know, and if I could sidebar, what's interesting, and I brag about this all the time, is I know where every single one of my albums came from. Every last one. I could pull any random album. All of those Impulse records, I could pull a random one. I'll tell you exactly where it came from. So I know what my first jazz album was, and it was Charlie Mingus Chaz on the debut label, and it was a red wax copy. It was random as hell, and that was my first jazz album that I actually dug myself. But
did you buy
backtracking,
it? Did you buy it because it was red?
Say that again.
Did you buy it because it was red? Is that what made you buy your first?
No, I bought it because the album cover was crazy. Charles Mingus is sitting up there. He's in this type of pose, and he has a chess set, like he's playing somebody that's out of the frame. But I was just like, yo, and man, it was super high gloss, and I was just like, man, this looks interesting. I didn't even know who Charlie Mingus was. To give you an idea, I was already back out of school at this time. So this is like 2000. This is 2007, because I'm out and about back up here looking for records now, you know. But yeah, but there's a very important event that happened that got me collecting records for value, for specific genres. And so if I fast forward, I'm out of Tallahassee, I'm back up here. It's 2006. And I broke up with my girlfriend, the one that gave me the record player. We both left Tallahassee. She got a job up here. I'm back up here. I'm finishing school, and we broke up. We had an apartment together, so I have to go back and live with my mom, which was like the worst thing ever. Not because of my mom, because I just wanted my own space. I had been away to college for a long time. I felt like I had even progressed out of there and got an apartment with a chick, you know. So now I'm back in my mom's house, and I'm trying to find some type of purpose. And so one of my friends that I went to school with, he was like, hey, you want to work on this campaign with me for this guy who's running for councilman here in DC? And I was like, yeah. I said, you know, let me do that. And so we're out, we're working, we're canvassing Ward 6, which is the Eastern Market part of DC. And we're out and we're getting out of the car, and this guy pulls up, this young guy pulls up in front of us in the parking space in front of us. And he just takes out 4 crates of records and sits them on the sidewalk. And I'm like, wait a minute, you know, what's that about? And I asked, and he's about to get back in his car. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing with those? And he's just like, whatever, and takes off. And I'm like, yo, wait a minute, hold on. I said, and you know, we're just getting started. We haven't even canvassed a single house yet. And I'm like, I want those. You know, I have records. I want those. And I'm buying records sparingly. I said, you know, I want those records. And so the guy who was campaigning, his name is Curtis. He was like, okay, yeah, I don't know why to this day. My biggest regret is not putting those crates in his car. But this gives you good insight to how I really didn't value records for monetary and rareness at the time. So I was like, okay, if they're here when we're done, I'll take them. So we go out and we're gone for hours, 3-4 hours. And they're there when we come back. But when we come back, this lady's going through and she's taking out these records. And I'm like, those are my records. You know, and the lady was like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, these records are sitting here. And I was like, no. We're out campaigning and everything like that. And I just left them here and said I was going to come back and get them, or whatever. And the lady was like, okay, whatever. So she takes like maybe a stack of records and she just leaves. So I was like, oh, I put the rest in the car. And
you had a car the whole time?
When I got, say it again?
You had a car there, you could have put them in from the get-go.
Bro, that's just, I mean, if that doesn't give you insight into somebody who really doesn't have their head in the game, you know what I mean? Like, at this time, you think, this is 2006, I'm still not heavy into collecting it. But that's what did it for me, because I remember I'm going through the crates, the type of music that was in there predominantly was like Bob Dylan, Rolling Stones, a lot of classic rock, but they were like mono copies, and they were heavy, like as far as value, mono versus stereo in that genre is where you want to be. And so I don't know. The only thing I don't know is how I ended up with gold mine price thing. I think my mom got one for me from the library. She was like, "Oh, here's a price guide. You can see how much your records are worth."
Oh, a guide. There's like I didn't hear what you said. A guide, like a price guide?
Yeah, it's gold mine. Gold mine record price
yeah.
catalogs. And I was familiar with the value of things that are collectible because I used to have cards. I used to get the price guides every month. So I was like, oh yeah, okay, well maybe I should, look them up to see if they're even worth anything. Because even prior to that, if I could jump back to the flea markets in Tallahassee, records were like, how much are these records? Oh, $24, $10 for $1. That's unheard of today. That's how records were. That's even how records were when I got back and started collecting in DC. You would go to the Salvation Armies. I would like make runs, Salvation Army run, the Goodwill chain run, because this area is DC, Maryland, and Virginia. You could be in all three going over one bridge. You could be in DC by the beginning of the bridge, Maryland in the middle, and then into Virginia by the end. Literally, there's a bridge like that that's in all three. And so the Woodrow Wilson Bridge. And so this area had these different regions. So it's like you could go and hit the Maryland circuits of the Salvation Armies, and then you could go into DC and hit those Salvation Armies. And then you could go right into Virginia and hit those Salvation Armies in a half a day. I'm talking like visiting 8 or 9 stores. You know what I mean? And so this was the heyday. And Salvation Army always priced their records $5 for $1 and things of this nature. That's how I was able to just get amazing records, and not having to pay top dollar for them, But where I'm going with that is, going back to the whole price guide thing, I started looking them up, and one of the records in there that was a jazz record. Now, remember, the Charlie Mingus was the first jazz record that I dug. But the first jazz record that was really in my possession, like jazz, was in this collection. It was Beat the Hell. And it was Lloyd Glenn's Chickaboo on Aladdin Records. And I remember looking at that record, another red vinyl record, by the way. It's up on this top in one of these 4. I still have it. The record was $2,100 in that gold mine price guide. And I was like, wait a minute.
What?
wait a minute. These things are 10 for $1. How could this possibly be right? And I remember like immediately trying to go on offer. And this is when I got hip to the condition sensitive, or the condition also lends to its value. Because I went to a record store, and this is like my first time in a record store at this time in my entire life.
You just said, oh, this is after you had got those crates?
After I got the crates, after I looked up the value of most of these records and saw that this one was worth $2,100, now that is the single moment that got me into a record store for vinyl for the first time in my life. Now, of course, I've gone to like record stores for CDs and stuff like that, but a specific record store, the record store's closed now. It's called Roadhouse Oldies. And I took the record up there and I wanted money. And the guy looked at it and he was like, I'll give you like $5 for this. I'm like, $5? And I remember, just standing on principle. I was like, you gotta be crazy. I was like, do you have a price guide here? And I showed him, and I showed him the price guide, and the guy was like, well, let me show you something. He tried to put it on, and the needle was just like jumping off the record and just skipping. Like, you could hear a skip, but when you could see a skip, it's bad. So that all of this is kind of molding me as a collector. So I'm learning, how to grade records, and that's important with the value. And now, pretty much the rest is history from there. I start off, really collecting for samples from hip hop. And if you do that, if anybody does that, try to find samples, you're going to get into jazz. You're going to find the Ahmad Jamal De La Soul sample. You're going to find the Sylvia Strickland Junior Mafia sample for Get Money. Well, that's not jazz, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, if you try to follow, those guys were sampling jazz heavy back then. And so that's it.
It's interesting to hear that you got into it through the collecting lens, like you were already in there. The base was music, but kind of what tipped you was your collecting nature and mind. I didn't know that from your videos because you express so much passion for the music. But I know that other side of you where it's like the collector that it's, what it is. We all know. But that ooh, this is worth something. That's interesting. Yeah. And then, so jazz wasn't something that you were wasn't even really on your radar until you kind of fell into it through collecting, trying to find samples.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Interesting. Because you're so deep into the jazz, I would have thought that you might have, that's met a lot of people from our generation. That's how they got into jazz, is by being hip hop heads and working back that way.
Yeah, always working backwards, right? I mean, everybody that I talk to, I don't know many people our age that just straight up started like, oh, I want to collect jazz.
That's what, I was a hip hop head, but I didn't get into jazz through hip hop. I was aware, I guess, that there was a connection, but my dad used to listen to jazz, and at the time it was called Club Price, but Costco used to sell these, you would buy CDs there, and they had, he had a Verve 5 CD compilation, Blue Note 5 CD compilation, all these jazz compilations of so all these this amazing jazz music. So I used to hear that as a kid, and then like you, I was downloading music in college, just going through down hip hop, and then one day it was right after I broke up with a girlfriend, I was I think I had burnt one jazz mix from songs I had downloaded with maybe a song of Miles, Coltrane, and I was buying hip hop CDs like crazy. I'm I'm gonna go start buying jazz CDs. So I just go into HMV, which is where I would buy CDs, and it was a floor I had never been to before. Hip hop was in the basement. This was on the 3rd floor, and I was
right.
I just went at it with no knowledge. It was 3 for 30, so it was $10, and it was Blue Note, it was Prestige. I just started every week. I was going and buying spending $100 on jazz CDs, but it wasn't because of hip hop. I just decided I'm gonna start buying jazz.
That's dope. That's dope.
And then I wish it was vinyl. It was CDs, because that's what I I don't know why I never thought, oh, let's go look for some records, because we had a record player in my apartment. My cousin who's from Ann Arbor, from Michigan, came up with his turntables, and we lived together in Montreal. We had records in our apartment, and I never once thought to go friggin' buy records. This was early, like 2003.
Like, who would have thought, right? You know, it's similar to like how I just had crazy records just sitting on the side and just never, it never clicked. But there's always that moment where it clicks, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I was grateful to discover the music, and obviously you could, by buying CDs, it was a great way to discover it, and downloading, but it would have been cool if I was also, like, when you're young, I was moving all the time after that. So like if I had been having to move the amount of records that I had in CDs, it would have been hell, right? Like I was moving every year.
Oh my God. Yeah, that would have been hell. That's crazy. Yeah, that's the one thing that every record collector just dreads, is having to move their collection. Even if I just had to move this off of this wall to that wall, God, you know.
I haven't done it yet. Like since I started buying more heavily, like in 2013, 14, 15, I guess, like I haven't moved. Like when I moved here, I only had a few crates of records.
Right.
And then, you know, thanks to you, I blame you. The collection has grown exponentially.
Yeah. Hey, it's a good thing to be blamed for something. I'll take that.
So okay, so let's go back here. You're buying. So you go to this record store, because now you're like, knowing the knowledge you have and the how crazy your collection is. Like, this is not that long ago. We're talking about, like, you don't really have any records. You're going to your first record store. It's like before 2000, just before 2010, maybe 2007, 8.
Yeah, first record store 2006. Like, you know, after I got those random crates of records on the side of the road and started looking at them, then I started going to the thrift stores.
And then you're doing the hip hop sample thing. Are you going to record stores regularly? Then you start going like.
No, man. I to be honest with you, I wasn't going to record stores. And to be honest with you, I kind of still don't, to get my records. Like, unless I'm online and I see something pop up in their inventory that I want to go in there and get. I never really hit the record stores up for records. Most of these records, the bulk of my records, so I started getting strategic with my collecting, because like I said, you know, I'm a collector of things, and I try to collect at a high level when I'm collecting things. So, you know, my strategy when there was baseball cards, you know, and I would see like people selling them, you know, on the side of the road at a yard sale, you know, my whole thing was just like, you know, almost standard questions, you know, how much for all of them? I don't even want to look at them. How much for all of them? Do you have more? Do you know anybody with any more? And it was always like led to another thing. Like, yeah, shoot, you want these old cards? You could, you know, call this number. This is my uncle. So that's how it was with records too. I would stop on the side of the road where I know there were flea markets all the time, or community yard sales. And I wasted a lot of money because, like, that was my whole I guess it was kind of like an arrogant thing too. Like, you know, I'm just, you know, showing up a badass. Look, I don't even want to look at them. How much for all of them? You know, and, you know, because I really wasn't getting too specific on what I was collecting at the time. I hadn't dialed in. So everything to me had value. And, you know, at this time, like, I was going hard for like Black gospel. And that was what I was flipping. I was flipping that to pay the rent. I was flipping that, you know, just to buy more records. And so, you know, that's kind of, it's kind of how I was collecting at the time. I really wasn't going into the record stores, because the record stores never have those 5 or 10 for $1. It was always the Goodwills and the Salvation Armies. And then you have some I guess advocacy groups or nonprofits that that had a thrift store was the byproduct of what they were doing. So, for example, there was called some Teen Village is in Maryland, and basically what they did is they get teens that were in trouble, and they kind of teach them during the day or whatever. And as these kids are graduating through their program, they could go run this thrift store that the nonprofit had. And so, you know, they were teaching these kids how to unload trucks, do inventory, price things. So you had a lot of those around. They're all gone, by the way, now. And we're talking like, you know, late 2000s to for 2007 to like 2010, I were going to these places. American Rescue Workers, they had a thrift store. Any money that they made, they gave back to the nonprofit. There was another one that took ex-cons and rehabilitated them, and they let them run these storefronts, you know, to kind of have a sense of having a job and kind of get them back into society. And so these places were crazy with records. Like people literally were just, you know, I would be going through records and like literally like these guys pull up with their truck and just unload more. Here you go, buddy. You know, and I'm just like, man, I was almost out of here. It was the heyday. All of those places are closed now. So
it sounds like it's like things dreams are made of, but also sounds overwhelming.
I think it was definitely overwhelming, but I was always up for the challenge because, you know, I kind of wanted it all. But what I was getting at is I was getting strategic with my collecting, and I decided to start going to defaulted storage auctions.
Damn, you did it all.
And, you know, at this time, for a long time, I only had maybe like 8 squares of worth of records. And then one day, one great day, I hit the jackpot in a defaulted storage auction. And probably in that one haul, I got maybe like 13,000 records.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Like so much so I didn't have any way to move them. And some of the guys that were there that we used to battle, like I was known in the group of guys. It was always the same people who were showing up to these storage auctions and flipping stuff. I was known for the guy, like if I get a unit, if I bid on it and I win it, then I only want the records out of it. And so all the other guys that were there, they were like, hey Van, you know, you only want the records out of that one, right? I was like, yeah. You're like, what are you gonna do with that couch? What are you gonna do with that that dining room table? I was like, you can have it, because the rules were when you have to have the locker emptied out by the end of the day, because they want to rent it back out. So I was like, I had to deal with these guys. I'll just take these records. You have to clean it out. You have everything else in there. So that was the thing. But this one day, that I decided not to go, one of those guys who I looked out for, I gave him some furniture, and I guess he just made a fortune off of it. And he was like, yo, if I ever see records, I'm gonna call you if I get them. So that's what that, he was like, hey man, I got some records for you. And I'm like, oh, okay. You know, I'm thinking I'm gonna pick up like a couple of carts. And he has like a whole truckload. I'm like, what the hell? What is that? You know,
it wasn't even you at the auction. It was someone else that got the mother haul.
It's because he just knew. You know, I looked out for him. Yeah. I didn't even go that day. I think I had work. It was like the best day of my life. And you know, that just really took my numbers of my collection just way up, man. Matter of fact, you know, a lot of those boxes that are in that video, some of them are in crates, some of them are in boxes. Those boxes that you saw in those videos, those were the original boxes from that home.
So how much did you keep? Like that was mostly what kind of music, or was it a whole mix? Or
it was a DJ collection. So a lot of it was a lot of 12-inch singles. I would say maybe like almost half of it was 12-inch singles. But man, they were crazy, man. I'm talking about like rare disco 12-inch singles. I ended up buying, do I have it? I don't think I have it. Freddie Fresh. Are you familiar with that price guide?
No.
Yeah. He has this price guide that he put out just for rap. Well, actually, it's not a price guide. It's more so a appraisal guide. I don't know what you would call it, but he ranks them by rarity. So he has disco 12 inches, but a lot of hip hop 12 inches. So I bought that book, and man, like most of the rare ones that were in that book that he had 3 or 5 stars next to were in that collection. But naturally, it being a DJ's collection, I had a lot of of the popular music from the 70s and 80s in there too. And there were some jazz, wasn't a lot of jazz, but there was some jazz. But yeah, I still have probably, I would say 40% of that haul I kept.
Damn. That's crazy. And how did you, so like, cause knowing where your collection is, we've seen it over the years, where did all this jazz come from? And how did you get into the, like, cause you're pretty deep into jazz. It's not just like, oh, I got some Miles Davis. Like, how did that translate to that deep, deep jazz passion and knowledge?
Man, the jazz kit was all handpicked by me, man. That was literally, that's the largest part of my collection, or maybe the second largest. Like, really, I have just as much hip hop as I have jazz. Damn. But those jazz records, all of the Blue Notes and the Prestige, that was all me, man. That was all me. It's like, it didn't come in, like, I didn't inherit it. I didn't get it in like that big haul, like I said, for the most part. That was me finding out, like, really chasing valuable jazz, because I still really initially wasn't that into it. You know, I was finding the Blue Note. Right? It didn't take me long to discover Blue Note after I discovered that one record was worth $2,100. And so, you know, it was on, and I never forget. I was in the thrift store. First Blue Note that I dug in the wild was Hank Mobley's The Turnaround, and you know, I think the price guy had that at like $300. It was beat, so I was like, oh, you know. And you know, it wasn't long from there. I just went off the deep end, man, hitting all of these stores like I was. You know, I would take off of work, you know, for a day when I knew like a thrift store had just gotten in a big haul of records, and you know, I was leaving work to go dig. I was leaving lunch to go dig. But if it was a big haul of records and I knew that I could take, because even the internet really wasn't a good resource for finding out what was worth a lot of money at that time.
Yeah.
eBay kind of, sort of, but we're still talking like 2005, 2007. What does Pop Site go back to?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I doubt it was, you know, what.
I don't even think it goes back to 2005, 2006, 2007. It might. I think maybe 2008 is when they kind of started doing their thing.
I don't see really anything earlier. It's around that time, like 2010.
Right. So, you know, everything I was learning about that was valuable was off of the Goldmine handheld price catalog, you know. So I started following, like, snatching these Blue Notes. And then, you know, Blue Note just did their thing, man. They were spot on with their covers and all of that stuff. So they always stuck out, you know. And so that's when I really started to snatch the jazz. And then naturally, you start buying all of this jazz and all of these Blue Note records that you see. And I remember, like, I never forget, early on in my collecting days, I used to think that that Impulse records, I thought they were like some like cheap budget reissue records. So I skipped a lot of those early on. I don't know why they looked like that to me in the beginning. I'm just like, it's one of those orange and black records. And I can't even tell you how much I left in the wild, man. I left a lot. I left a lot in the wild. There was a lot, when I didn't know early on digging, I could tell you a lot of, I remember I could probably have a stellar jazz collection right now, more so than what I already have, if I knew what I was doing this one day that I was in a record store. And one of the records that I specifically remember skipping over because it looked stupid to me was Sonny Rollins' Way Out West, or Out West.
Yeah.
It just didn't, I was digging by eye, you know, not by knowledge or whatever you want to call it. And to me, I was just like, oh, look at that stupid novelty record. The guy sitting in a cowboy uniform with a saxophone. Yeah. And I just remember there were some records that I took from there. There were some Blue Notes in there. And it haunts me, man. Like, I just remember that day, and I just can't remember everything that I left behind. But I know that was probably, anybody right now would trade a lot to be in that moment to get those records right then and there. Because I could only imagine how that.
And how did you get into because like for me, that's what all I knew about jazz was like 60s, 50s and 60s, like Blue Note, that stuff. Watching your videos is how I discovered like 70s jazz and opening my mind up to like the more unnecessarily avant-garde, or let's call it spiritual jazz. Like the 70s scene like when I was listening to jazz or what I was reading, people like were not down with 70s jazz. It was like early 60s was what you wanted to listen to. So when did
Yeah.
you get into like that other side of jazz or the evolution of jazz, that like 70s stuff?
Doug Carn,
Yeah.
Infant Eyes, that album.
And you
That
just
album right there is what did it for me.
just by finding them, like you kind of discovered.
Yeah, I found it. It looked special. I got home, I put it on, and the song, what is it, Moonchild, off of that record?
Yeah.
That was it. That let me know, like, okay, this is jazz, but this doesn't sound like those Lee Morgan albums. You know, this doesn't sound like, you know, those Jimmy Smith Blue Notes that I have. This is different. It was spiritual, you know, and it was a nod to that spiritual jazz. And so you start talking to people, other collectors that I know, and I'm like, man, you know, this is like my favorite record right now. And they're like, oh, you like that? You should check out this. And that's how it happens. And I just started getting into that spiritual jazz swim lane. And, you know, that opens up everything else. And then like right around that time, it ran me right into the VC, right? And other collectors who had knowledge at the time, the older collectors, you know, Derek, and I think Chris and I, Astral Traveler, I think we hit the VC at the same time, I'm pretty sure. And, you know, just so I'm looking at these guys, and I know a little bit, but, you know, I don't know like they know. You know, they lived it. They were actually of age when that stuff was dropping, and they were in the music store flipping through vinyl, buying that stuff. You know, they have day one issues of a lot of those of that jazz. So, you know, I'm just starting to listen. I start listening. I'm like, oh, wow, okay, so that's like that Doug Carn? Yeah, I'll take that.
What couple questions. One, that video, it's like a famous video in the VC where you're in a basement digging through, and it's just like the craziest Blue Notes. In my mind, I have maybe it was your uncle's place, or whose place was that? Where it's almost
that was my mother's cousin. So it was a family member that I had never met him. I had been in that house plenty of times as a kid. My Aunt Margaret, this was one of her sons. This guy actually, that guy, he does a lot of work with the Grammys. So it's not so much a coincidence that he had a collection like that. But it really wasn't his collection, it was his father's, and his father had just passed. If you listen carefully in that video, you can hear my mom upstairs saying, okay, now how do you want to price this? What do you want to do with this? They were preparing a house for an estate sale. And so my mom called me and she was saying, yo, I think you might want to come over here. Because I had trained my mom for Blue Notes. You know what I mean? Because my mom likes to go out to yard sales and stuff. So I trained her. Blue Note, Prestige, call me, take pictures, send them to me. And so she was like, yeah, you might want to get them.
That's my other question actually, is one of the things I remember you saying, which now hearing your story about like how you got into collecting and buying records, is I remember you talking about you have surrogate diggers, like surrogate diggers. So you enrolled your some family members to help you.
You best believe it. So and it's paid off. It's paid off, man. I think my second one is my cousin, man. He's always, my cousin, who was one of my surrogate diggers, he's the main one that told you about that crazy guy. I don't know if you've seen my video about the junk store owner.
Probably seen it.
I uploaded a video a couple of weeks ago where I actually like live talking to this junk store.
Oh yeah. I saw that.
My cousin is the one that said, hey, there's a guy over here with records. And then I started getting pings from other people saying, have you been over to Rhode Island Avenue and seen that guy with the crazy records? I'm like, no, I'll go over there. So yeah, my surrogate diggers are definitely out and they got their eyes peeled for me.
That but getting back to that that basement when you're going through those Blue Notes was just like, that was ridiculous. I'm sure you've never seen that many of Blue Notes in one place like that.
No, man, I haven't. No. Blue Note, Prestige, that was just a top-notch jazz heavy haul, man. That was a crazy haul.
Did you leave with everything or?
Everything.
family
Yeah,
price? Did you have to pay for it, or was it like, oh, here that your family?
Oh yeah. I gave him some money, and that was the most nerve-wracking closing of a deal that I ever had. I just had to be honest with him. I'm like, look, man. I was like, I can't give you what this stuff is worth. And so then I'm sitting there biting my nails. He was just, well, just give me what you think you want to give me. I said, you don't want to do that. So I think I gave him like a couple $100. And once the deal was closed, I was just like, man, I just want to, so the vinyl gods and vinyl karma could stay on my side. You do know this is like thousands and thousands of thousands of dollars worth of music. He was like, man, take it. So I'm like,
oh my gosh,
yeah,
that's insane. Yeah. That's nuts.
That was crazy. That was a crazy haul.
Okay, I mean, we could talk forever. Did you end up pulling some records to show us, or what?
I did. I pulled some records. I have a stack. I know we're probably running long, so I'm not going to show them all. But I did.